found the dial-in information for tonight's meeting. So I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's community meeting for the Ualapu Kuleana Homestead project. My name is Cedric Duarte with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we go ahead and get started, I would like to ask Commissioner from Molokai, Zachary Helm, if you could offer a pule to get our meeting going here this evening. Commissioner Helm, if you would, please.
Yeah, mahalo, Cedric. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to serve our beneficiaries as we continue to discuss the planning process for the Ualapu Kuleana Homestead project. We come together to ask you for your blessings. We pray for your spiritual guidance this evening. Bless all of the participants, including our DHHL staff, Ahanui Homestead Association members, our Kupuna, G70 consultant team, all beneficiaries, and all other community participants. Please keep us safe and healthy during these challenging times. Help us work together to build our community's vision. Fill us with your grace, Lord. Please guide us through this process as we put our beneficiaries on this land. I humbly ask you to shower us with your spiritual strength and guidance this evening and throughout this process. With all of this, we pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Wow.
Hello, Commissioner Helm. Before we dive into the agenda for tonight's meeting, I do want to acknowledge that we have Chairman William J. Isla Jr. joining us, and he did want to make a few words, make a few comments here this evening before we jumped into the meeting. So, Chair, if you go ahead and unmute if you're there.
Yep. Thank you, Cedric. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. And Zachary, thank you very much for that pule. Yeah, I wanted the ability to at least say a few words to open up this meeting, basically because of an incident that occurred up in Ualapu yesterday. We had some archaeologists that were working up there as subcontractors to Group 70, doing work for us, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And the appearance is that someone fired one or more rounds into the direction where they were working. And I just want to state that even though you may disagree with the process that is ongoing right now that the department is going through, that behavior is not porno. If you have a disagreement with us, if you disagree with the process, the right way to handle that is to come to a meeting like this, to write us a letter, to send us an email where we can talk story about your concerns, and you can share your concerns on the meeting like tonight would be a good way. So if there are any Molokai community members who perhaps may know of the folks who may have been hunting but accidentally fired rounds in the direction of our archaeologists, we want you to come and share your concerns with us, but not behave in that kind of manner. I say that, and I say that following up with these words. The department and the commission has a duty. We have a fiduciary duty to provide lots, loans to homesteaders. And there is a desire by homesteaders who are on the wait list specifically for Ualapu for the department to develop these agricultural lots. And so we're not going to be deterred by these types of actions. If you have an issue, write me, make an appointment with me, send me an email, call our contact center. But that's a proper way to register your concerns about the process and the homestead development process that's going on in Ualapu. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Cedric.
Thank you, Chair, for those words, and thank you for joining us here this evening. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to this meeting. This is our first conversation with the broader Molokai community. We have had a beneficiary consultation meeting direct with applicants and lessees of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. But tonight's meeting is to share our project with the broader community. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and then we're gonna go through tonight's presentation. Can everybody see that? Gigi, can you nod if you see that? Okay, terrific. Okay, we've done the opening pule introductions. I would like to acknowledge that we have several Department of Hawaiian Homeland staff on the call with us this evening from our planning office, from Homestead Services, both here on Oahu and on the island of Molokai. We also have our consultants for this project, Group 70, on board, and you'll be hearing from them a little bit later in the call. The agenda for this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose and the outcomes of the Ualapu Kuleana Homestead project. There's going to be an opportunity for questions and discussion at the end, and we hope to facilitate a robust conversation with the community. I will talk a little bit about next steps as we wrap up the conversation. For those of you who have been a part of our beneficiary consultation meetings, this slide is going to look familiar to you, but just sharing, in our meetings with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, we all have a little bit of Kuleana. We ask that you be respectful of the person who is talking when we do get to the discussion portion, and that you don't interrupt. We ask that you wait for the facilitator, which will be me. I'll be facilitating the meeting. Ask for me to call on you, or we can utilize the chat box for questions, and we'll be addressing questions throughout the meeting. When addressing other participants, we just ask that you be respectful and show aloha and treat each other how you'd like to be treated. And throughout many of our conversations, we know that we're going to agree on some topics and we're going to disagree on some topics, and that's okay. It's okay to agree to disagree and accept that others have different perspectives and opinions. And as long as we show each other aloha, even when we disagree, there's going to be an opportunity for us to agree on something else later on. We ask tonight that you have an open mind, and we hope that you take home some new ideas and information. And I'm going to do my very best. We have about nearly 60 people on this virtual meeting. So I'm going to do my very best to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to have their voice heard and to speak and make a comment. And I ask that you just give us an opportunity to let everybody share their voice. We are a couple of years now, almost 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think many of us have gotten used to utilizing virtual meetings. Zoom is the platform we're on right now. And so you'll see on your screen that there will be a button for chat. And those of you that would like to put comments into the chat, we'll go ahead and work through those when we get to the question and answer portion of tonight's conversation. And you see here on the bottom of the screen, the slides, this video, and information about this project as a whole will be on the landing page of the department's website where you got the information for tonight's meeting. You heard Chair Ayla mention a little bit earlier that the department and staff, we have a fiduciary responsibility. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge that we would not be here today if not for the efforts of Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole and the advocates who fought for the passage of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which was signed into law July 9th, 1921. So we're currently in the centennial year of the act, with the first pilot project for the Hawaiian homes for homesteading happening at the Kalanianaole colony there on the island of Molokai. So we always want to acknowledge that we would not be here if not for the Keli'i Maka'ainana, Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole. This is a graphic of our planning process, and I'd like to introduce you, for those of you who don't know, to our acting administrator for the department's planning department, Andrew Choi. And he's going to walk you through this graphic and explaining how the department plans for future homesteads. Andrew?
Mahalo, Cedric. Aloha, everyone. So real quickly, this is kind of the process that the department and the Hawaiian Homes Commission uses to plan out the department's resources, its lands, its funding. And there's 3 tiers to the planning system. At the top tier is the general plan, which guides statewide policies and initiatives. At the lower tier are our strategic program plans and our island plans. Now, our island plans articulate the Hawaiian Homes Commission's land use policy for all of our lands across the state. Each plan relates to a specific island, and in that plan, the commission designates lands for specific uses: homesteading, open space, commercial community use. So it's in the island plans that the commission designates its land use policy for Hawaiian homelands. The Hawaiian Homes Commission has exclusive land use authority over Hawaiian homelands, which means that the commission has the authority to designate what uses should be on Hawaiian homelands. And it is not subject to county zoning or state land use controls. That is the power that is vested in the Hawaiian Homes Commission through the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. On the third tier of planning are more regional specific plans. So we go from islands to specific individual tracts in our island plans. So we have our regional plan, which went through consultation for Molokai a couple of years ago. And then we also have our development plans. Here tonight, we are going to be discussing our homestead settlement plan, which falls into this development plan category. And with that, I'd like to pass it back to Cedric.
Thank you, Andrew. For the Molokai Island Plan, many of our beneficiaries have worked directly with Gigi Kyrell from our planning office. She's going to walk you through this slide. Gigi, if you could go ahead and unmute and take it away.
Mahalo, Cedric. Aloha, everyone. My name is Gigi. I'm with the Department Planning Office here on Oahu. Andrew just described our overall planning system that we use here at the department. One of the plans that we work with is the Molokai Island Plan. It was adopted by the Hawaiian Homes Commission in June of 2005. Our island plan went through extensive consultation with the beneficiary community there on Molokai. Ualapu was identified as a high priority development area back in 2005, and it was selected as the first priority for the department's Molokai Island Plan for new residential areas. The land use designations in the island plan included residential, general agriculture, special district, and community use. Next slide. We also have a Molokai regional plan, which was recently updated just about 2 years ago. Regional plans build a sense of community and capacity. They stimulate partnerships for development and improvements. They facilitate beneficiary participation in issues and areas of concern and identify priority projects within existing and planned homestead areas. Regional plans document current conditions and trends. They analyze state and county plans to identify a prioritized list of projects important to the community and to the department. The proposed Ualapu Kuleana Homestead project is a beneficiary-driven project. It was proposed by the community, and it went. The project and the plan went through extensive consultation over a period of 15 months, and the regional plan was adopted by the Hawaiian Homes Commission in February of 2020. The Ahunui Homestead Association was identified during that time as the community champion for this proposed Kuleana Homestead project in the Molokai Regional Plan. Next slide.
Thank you, Gigi. And I do see that there are a couple of questions coming into the chat. We're not ignoring those. We are going to get to those at the conclusion of the presentation. So go ahead and keep piling them in as we go through this evening's presentation. We're very fortunate to have the folks from Group 70 assisting us on this project. And from G70 tonight, we have several members, but taking us through the next set of slides will be Kavika McKeague. Kavika, if you go ahead and unmute and please continue.
So aloha ayahi kako. Mahalo for allowing us to be here and share this project with everyone this evening. Yeah, with me this evening, I have the pleasure to be working with from our firm, which is based here in Honolulu, Mr. Ryan Shar, who's a fellow principal on the engineering side. I'm with the planning side. Also with us tonight, helping us run the tech side is Miss Barbara Natal, who's an associate with the firm and also a senior planner who's helping to project manage, and Mr. P. Lonnie Smith, who's also assigned as our staff planner. And again, it is a pleasure and a humble one at that to be able to serve the department and the beneficiaries in this capacity. So mahalo for allowing us to be here. So my Kuleana, no pun intended on this slide, but to share a little bit as to how we got here, what is the Kuleana homesteading plan specifically, and we've been able to work on projects similar to this in areas of Pu'uopai, in Waimea Kikaha, on the island of Kauai, as well as Anahola, excuse me. And so the Kuleana homesteading, we figured we start with the context of the word itself, right? So with Tutu Kavena, these are all the definitions. All of us who maybe have some familiarity with Olelo Hawaii, we understand Kuleana to be a right, a responsibility, and there over time did involve a legal context, if you will, an administrative context. But for this project too, we want to kind of take it a step back to say, this idea of ho'o Kuleana, to invoke a process of Kuleana is to entitle or to give a right of possession, but also to give a responsibility back. And that really, the responsibility as understood through the context of what this particular homesteading process and plan is supposed to be, is about that reconnection of Kanaka back to Aina, of ancestral relevancy and connectivity and identity through the intention of the Homestead Act. So just kind of framing a little bit, and when we look at, like, for example, just even mele from our beloved Ali'i Makaina na, Kuhio Kalani na Ole, there's a lot of words that often come up in the descriptions of people who were writing mele in the time in the 1900s. And usually it had something to do with O'oe ke kahe elele, right? You are the delegate, you are the representative, you are the messenger. And in some cases it was, kailele ike kapo, like you're the one that's recognized as having that ancestral, you're carrying that ancestral weight. In other cases, he was referred to as kailele ola Hawaii. He was the hope of life for Hawaii and for Hawaiians. And the one I think is most endearing to me is kailele aloha ikalahui, the one that's filled with aloha for his nation. So just wanted to maybe set that foundation to go on to the next slide, please. And so for context, right, the department is trying to proactively address the wait list. And what we wanted to start with is just our understanding of the numbers. So right now we have 2,144 individuals. That's a combined number of those on ag, residential, and pastoral for the island of Molokai. As you can see here on the slide, there's a breakdown about 1,100 that are on the wait list for agricultural parcel, 837 for residential, and about 207 for pastoral. And many of these folks who are on the waiting list have been waiting for more than 30 years. So as Gigi, I think, will be sharing in a slide later on, the idea of Kuleana is to some degree intended to address a specific kind of homesteading, but also perhaps even looking at it as a way to expedite addressing the waitlist numbers. Next slide, please. So, in terms of, okay, what's the rula here in terms of how do we administrate this? And so this comes through Hawaii Administrative Rules, Chapter 10 or Section 10, Chapter 10, Section 3, and is really designated for unimproved Hawaiian homelands that are made available. And the definition of available here is really being driven both by the planning processes that have preceded this, but also by the commission. And it can be available by a couple of factors that are described, either the physical characteristics of the aina itself and or distance from the existing utilities being two primary indicators as to how these lands could be made available for this kind of planning process. Next slide. So in that context, what is the responsibilities of DHHL for this Kuleana homesteading process? Well, one, the commission has a responsibility to effectively determine which wait lists will be used to make these awards. And then the department really, in terms of the context of its requirement, is to provide meets and bounds descriptions of the lots and essentially providing access to the lots that are being awarded. Again, these are unimproved lands, and actually, you can take us to the next slide, Cedric. The responsibilities of the lessees then are those who really are looking to have immediate access to aina for subsistence-based purposes primarily, and who are willing to live on the land and accepted as an unimproved lot. So those are really two key pieces of this puzzle. So an opportunity like this may not be for everybody. You know, some people may want to prefer, you know, with residential, a turnkey versus a vacant lot. In this case, yeah, we are trying to identify wherein on this acreage could there be, you know, sufficient access, as well as areas that make sense for certain reasons, which we'll also start to talk about this evening a little bit, to say, okay, we think we can achieve X amount of a particular type of lot for agricultural purposes or other purposes. So in the case of the lessees, you know, it's a commitment to this kind of lifestyle. And then over time, what we understand takes place here is that the lessees then become an active member of the Homestead Association, really of this community. And over time, this community actually can also develop their own sort of rules and standards of how they will build this community together. And the last part is that the lessees must maintain, as part of their agreement, the maintenance of the right-of-way to the tracks and the lots themselves. And I'll be back to share a little bit more details. So I'm passing this back to Gigi. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kavika. Go ahead, Gigi.
Mahalo. So this slide is just basically the overall very big picture process for the department through the planning phase. So we're here today and in the next few months in the planning phase. We are basically doing the research, data gathering, having community meetings such as this to get information and input from you folks and any questions. So that will complete the planning process. The outcome is we're going to have a settlement, what's called a settlement plan, which will show the layout of the homestead, the number of lots and the sizes of the lots. So today we do not know that yet. And then we are also will produce the state required environmental assessment under Hawaii Revised Statute, Chapter 343. So once planning is completed, we move on to the development phase. And as mentioned earlier, this is a particular type of homestead called a Kuleana Homestead. And so the department is required to put in minimum infrastructure, which basically is access to the homestead and the meets and bounds for the lots. Then we go into lot offering, where individual applicants are offered a lot in this project, and then awarding of those lots, and then lease signing. And then the last phase is the actual settlement for lessees to occupy the land. It was mentioned earlier, this is a subsistence agriculture project. So a residential house structure is not required. It is a lot is to be used for farming. So it is optional to the lessee whether to construct a residential structure. Okay, so after review of the 2005 island plan, which included residential in this area, and challenges the department has had to acquire and access water, which is required for our residential project. Also looking at the current economy there on island and for the community. Really, the Kuleana Homestead program for this area made the most sense. And as I mentioned earlier, it became the priority project #1 in the recently updated regional plan. The plan was approved in February of 2020, so fairly recent. And it went through extensive consultation for about 15 months, which is actually quite a bit more than our other regions. So this regional plan was thoroughly vetted within the community. And Our regional plan for Molokai has 5 priority projects. So this is just one of 5 that were community driven. Mahalo.
Thank you, Gigi. Then I'd also like to invite Barb from G70 to take us through the next set of slides with regard to the homestead settlement plan. Barb, are you there?
Actually, I'm going to fulfill the role of Barb this evening.
Got it. Thank you, Kavita.
Yeah. No.
Sorry.
So, I failed to tell you that. So thank you, sir. Yeah. So to dive into some of the details here. So again, going back to the rules, that DHHL together with interested applicants are to develop this settlement plan. And perhaps this also sets the context of the conversations we've been having with some of you folks, some of our field work that's been ongoing. And so really the settlement plan needs to have this as content, specifically the location and description of the track, identifying the selection of lots and the size of these lots. And then there's very specific details about, okay, it's not just about assigning lots, but wherein will we address things like a need for community use, common areas, shared spaces. When we did the work in Anahola and Pu'uopai, each community actually shared different kinds of mana'o as to what was important to them, but to make sure that we don't lose that sensibility of creating a community versus just, oh, you got your lot there, you're on your own, and this brother got his lot and he's on his own. We're trying to really foster a sense of building community and realizing that this community that would be fostered here is and would become a part of the larger community that already exists in Ualapu and Mana'e. So for example, we're also looking at ideas, or we have looked at ideas looking at community management, economic development. In one of these other areas, there was an albizia problem, which if you know, it's an invasive species. Well, albizia can be used for everything such as an energy source. It can be used to be milled and lumbered and used for timber. It can be used to then transpose into biochar that actually can go back and create new nutrients to feed back into the system. If we're looking to do everything from agroforestry, permaculture, forest restoration, etc. So we also want to understand what are the opportunities here to not just create community, but to sort of speak to the potentiality of economics, if you will, however you want to describe that and define that. And another key part and why we've been spending a lot of our time here on the front end doing a lot of field work is that the rules do call for the plan identifying, and in that identification, ensuring the protection and preservation of all significant, well, it says here historical, archaeological, and biological sites, but these could be in our words, our wahipana, our wahikapu, our mo'omeheu, everything that helps define that connection back to our kupuna. So we've actually had a biological survey completed for this project. As Chair Ayla mentioned, we had started the archaeological work out there and was quite surprised. We already knew there was an abundance of sites, but just in the first 2 days of the work that we had started, there was much more that was revealed. And so the intentionality of doing these resource studies is not to say, okay, well, here they are, and we're not going to care about them. It's like, okay, we want to identify them, work and share this information with those who are knowledgeable of the place, and figure out ways and approaches to ensure their proper stewardship and care. And again, if there's a community we're trying to foster that's going to be subsistence ag based, how does that model of community fit into the responsibilities therein that would be to continuing the stewardship of these resources into perpetuity for future generations? So again, we're very early in the process and we're still trying to develop an understanding of the AINA through these initial studies. And then lastly, for the plan's purposes, is to not just identify the lots and the resources and coming up with a layout, but also a specific timetable as to when the settlement can actually occur. So that's what we're actually aiming for here in the next about 6 to 9 months, working together with a lot of different folks. Next slide, please. So how does that translate? As I mentioned, we were starting some work. We've done some aerial imagery, some topography data, where we will be looking at things like historical land tenure and use, the existing land uses, understanding that there's a problematic erosion issue on the hillside, trying to look at soil quality, soil characterization that's good for planting, but also for filtration, looking at rainfall patterns and other sourcing of where water will be drawn from and access to the site. And also, trying to address things like social economic characteristics, like what would be a population here of Kanaka living in this area, and what kind of support would they need to be successful. As I mentioned, there's a series of archaeological and cultural biological studies that have been initiated and are ongoing. And additionally, what we found with both our Pu'upai and Anohola experiences is things like, for example, wildfire prevention, especially in areas that are seemingly can be isolated and or may have to address, one effect of climate change or one impact of climate change is the propensity for this ebb and flow of heavy rains that cause erosion, but they can cause invasive grasses to grow, which then dry out and become, potential fire fuels for wildfire. So how do we address that, manage that, and plan for that? So again, we're very early on in this discussion and trying to just understand all these components into the making and shaping of this plan. Next slide. So again, I've already hit on some things, some of the specifics specific to Ualapu that we've heard in some of our previous sharings of this information. We've done, and I'll show a slide here that shows our process. We had, community, well, this is our first community meeting, public community meeting, but we've had a beneficiary meeting and some other meetings. So things like erosion, accessibility, water availability, wellhead protection, off-grid infrastructure, like I mentioned, proximity to emergency response, but also to other public facilities, the care of natural and cultural resources, and therein, not just the tangible resources, but understanding the uniqueness of this place with specific beliefs, perspectives, and practices. And recognizing here too, that this area, as we understand it, has been a passageway, if you will, up into the upper Molokai areas for hunting and gathering purposes, and wanting to continue, perpetuate, and respect that. And lastly, trying to have as many conversations as we can with different folks from different perspectives and different expertise, because we're not the experts, we're just facilitators, right? So we bring what we can in our understanding as engineers and planners and designers, but we're really trying to harness the ike that lies within this community and trying to respect that along the way. Next slide, please. And like I started to mention, we want to understand to the positive benefits and also to be real about, are there negative consequences about creating a community here, a subsistence ag community, and trying to address things like proximity to public facilities and other community assets, and just sharing a list here in terms of schools, parks, the fish pond that is it's a key component of this ahupua perspective, if you will. So what we do at Maka has and will have an impact, to the viability and wellness of the fish pond, and trying to be mindful of those spatial and temporal relationships. And again, mentioning some of the things here like Kahale Pomaikai, the fire station, and the hospital, and some other services. Next slide, please. And last and surely not least, but again, this idea of relationship to larger community. There's been a lot of work and effort. Gigi had shared, with the regional plan process that was very specific to DHHL. In our understanding, there's been community input and shaping of this area that goes back as early as 1990 with an earlier master plan for Ualapu. 1994, there was this Molokai Subsistence Task Force report that started to really, I think it was one of its first studies of its kind that really looked at about the wellness of resources that were important for subsistence-based practices unique to Native Hawaiians. Again, there's some other studies here like the Mana'e GIS mapping, which also I think was a resource emphasis planning project, the Forest Reserve Management Plan, the Pakui Watershed Project, and then the Molokai Island Community Plan update, which also includes the East End Policy Statement. So this is just a lot of words to say we're trying to be mindful of the legacy that helps define what this place is currently and what it could be through the ongoing processes, both unique to DHHL and to the broader community at large. And that's why we're here this evening to speak with you folks. Again, the outcomes here, the Kuleana Homestead Settlement Plan is the first part of this. And as Gigi stated, we'll have to go through the environmental assessment. And if there's any necessity, because we will be potentially changing the land use designations that are unique to DHHL, we may have to go through an amendment process. Again, all of these would be subject to the approval of the Hawaiian Homes Commission. So on this last slide, again, this kind of giving you, where we are, where we're headed, where is this kind of going? We had a beneficiary meeting back in October. We're here this evening, December 1st. I can't believe we're in December. The intention here is that, all of our resource studies, the field work should be done by the end of the year. And by January, we want to come back out to the beneficiaries to kind of share the information that we've learned relative to the resources and some of these other things. And then really from there, based upon the input we received in, we have some homework to do over the next couple of months where we're going to take all of this, apply some specific criteria. And again, this evening I have Ryan Shar here, who is a key part to this planning process on our side with looking at engineering things like slope, topography, erosion, water accessibility, availability. And so those are going to become key parts to this. We intended to bring that information back out to both beneficiaries and to the larger community such as this evening around a May timeframe, refine our conversation as documented in the plan with the intention that we will have a draft settlement plan that we'll share with the Hawaiian Homes Commission by summer of next year. With sort of their blessing to move forward, then we would then enter the environmental assessment phase, which is about a 6 to 9 month process, depending, how quickly we can get through the documentation and the public review process and agency review process, with the intentionality that we would actually have the settlement plan, a environmental assessment, and any necessary amendments to the island plan to be presented to Hawaiian Homes Commission. Tentatively, we're looking at February 2023. So again, here we are, December 2021. We're to re-emphasize, we're very early in the planning and thinking and strategy to this. So again, we welcome you this evening, and I believe that's my last slide. So back to, I guess, Gigi or Cedric. Mahalo.
Thank you, Kavika. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And welcome to those of you who have joined the meeting since we opened. This is the Department of Hawaiian Homeland's first public community meeting for the Ualapu Homestead project. We did meet with beneficiaries, as Kavika mentioned a little earlier, and this is our first meeting with the broader community. And we are here now at the sort of the question and answer and discussion portion of the meeting. So I do want to get to some of the questions that are in the chat. And if there are any members of the community who would like to be called on to share questions, comments, or concerns, we're going to start by using the raising hand feature in Zoom, and then we'll sort of kind of go on into like old-fashioned raising of hands, and we might just unmute and have a little bit more fluid discussion as we move on. I also want to highlight that on the slide you see here, contact information for DHHL. We have an email address. So should you have any follow-up questions following tonight's conversation, please email us and share with us your questions, your comments, your concerns. We're here on the other side of that email. The staff that's here before you tonight will be responding to you in those emails. The project information for this particular project will be on this URL that you see on the screen. That's basically where you found the dial-in information for tonight's Zoom meeting. You're going to see a copy of this presentation, a recording of tonight's meeting, and any updates that we have along the way. So kind of going back up to the top, going back to La'a's original question, the alleged incident, and for those of you who had missed it, Chair Ayla spoke a little bit earlier in tonight's meeting about an incident with some of our archaeologists up in the Ualapu area yesterday. They were sort of verbally, I guess, harassed or spoken to by someone. And then following that, there were a few rounds that may have been shot in their direction. Right now, it's too early to say, La'a, if the incident was intentional or not. We're letting law enforcement conduct an investigation, and then we'll go from there, okay? Going to the next question, are we able to talk a little bit about how many individuals prioritized Ualapu as high priority or number one as far as for a project for DHHL? So I'd like to go to, let's see, Andrew, would you be able to address that question?
Sure. As part of the Molokai Island Plan process back in 2005, the department conducted a survey, and that survey is included at the back of the island plan. I will drop the link into the chat so folks who are interested can view the survey. It's it's one of the appendices as part of the island plan. Just real quickly, behind Ho'olehua, which is mostly settled already with agriculture homestead lessees, Ualapu was the next most preferred choice for agricultural lessees to settle.
Yeah, and Andrew, this is a part of how DHHL conducts its overall planning mission to your slide earlier within our general plans and our island plans and our regional plans. Yeah. Is that correct?
That is correct. As part of the as part of the island plan, we do conduct a survey to see what the preferences are of our waitlist applicants for a particular island and where they would like to live and settle. And that's one of the factors that the department uses to prioritize which areas to develop over the lifespan of the project. The lifespan of the island plan, which is usually a 20-year outlook. Some other factors that the department uses to prioritize are the cost to develop, as well as the suitability for siting homesteads in a particular area.
Thank you, Andrew. Mahina had a question in the chat that Gigi did respond to, but I want to read it out for those who may be dialing in by telephone. There was a question with regard to the wait list and which wait list would be. What does that mean about determining which wait list? Can you choose only waitlisters who are currently already living on Molokai or are originally from Molokai? This is basically about which wait list would be used for the Kuleana Homestead project. And Gigi's answer with regard to that was DHHL has 3 wait lists: residential, agricultural, pastoral, and it's up to the beneficiary which one they're going to apply for. Now, per our rules, only the Hawaiian Homes Commission can approve which wait list to use for a particular Kuleana Homestead project. Where the beneficiary is originally from or where they currently reside doesn't have any bearing. DHHL is required to go by the date of application. And one of the reasons why we included that into this slide, as far as the commission making a determination on this particular Kuleana Homestead settlement project, is this one is envisioned as subsistence ag on the island of Molokai, but we do have 2 other Kuleana Homestead projects that the department is working on. And in those areas, a pastoral list may be addressed, or as well as ag. So I wanted to just call that out. Let's see. Another question from Mahina in the chat, and this might be for you, Kavika. So G70 visited the site in November. I'm curious what their initial feedback is regarding the proposed development, considering the grade and slope and potential road conditions.
Good question. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Ryan Char if he can share, as he was one leading our site visit back in November. And as the engineer, he may have some clear ideas about what he saw and experienced and his understanding of some of the prevalent issues with existing grade and slope and road conditions. So Ryan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Kavika. I'm sorry, I don't have my camera handy with me right now, but I am just gonna say, with respect to our site visit in November, we realize it's very clear, obviously, that the site is very steep. The trails that we were able to access and walk, several of the trails obviously are on a very steep incline. Some of them are in a more of a switchback type of arrangement that allows some of that grade to be managed a little bit better. But at the same time, you can tell that through these different types of trails and roadways that are kind of crisscross the hillside, erosion has become a large problem here. And so I think my initial feedback as a civil engineer is that I'm going to have to be very heavily involved in or at least think very heavily about how erosion and access and slopes will be managed. We'll look at things where we may consider NRCS or Natural Resource Conservation Service best management practices that can allow for cutoff drains to be installed, or other types of drainage infrastructure that would help keep water away from potential roadways, or in this case, dirt roadways, 4x4 accessible roadways as required by the Kuleana Homestead project. That would make maintenance simple and easier for the future association that would be tasked with managing this land. And so I think, at least my initial take is that, it's definitely possible to put agricultural plots up here that may support an individual kind of single family home at some point in the future, but it's a little too early for us to say that still, what that means or how many or where exactly or what that layout will look like. But there are best practices in engineering and land management that I think would go a long way to assisting with the maintenance and erosion and access problems that would challenge any development here. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. A question in the chat with regard to the Department of Subsistence Ag process that Gigi had mentioned earlier, that within a subsistence ag homestead lot, the construction of a dwelling is not required. And the question here is, if a residential structure is not required for ag, are encampments allowed, easy ups, tents, pallet structures, etc. I'm wondering if Gigi or Andrew, would either of you be able to address that question?
I would, actually, I was starting to type a response. So my comment on that is, of course, health and safety codes apply, and any rules that the Kuleana Homestead Association has, those will apply as well. And generally, any structure, residential or anything, or any other kind of structure, does need to be filed with our office. The department, it's considered a lot improvement, or it may be considered a lot improvement. So it would need to be the information about what the structure is, the size, the purpose, all those good things would need to be sent to the department. For us to review, because it would be considered a lot improvement. And I believe we do have Homestead Services on the line. They are more the experts on that, but that's my general comment.
Thank you, Gigi. Continue on the chat. So Malia, I see your comment here in the chat, but I also see you on camera as well. And so I was going to read out your comment, but would you like to make the comment, or you would like me to go ahead and read it? I just don't want to paraphrase or get anything wrong from what you've mentioned here in the chat. So if you'd like to sort of share with the group, we can go ahead and just share it versus me, sort of taking your thoughts out of context.
Just a question though, will the chat be made part of official public testimony?
It is.
So, okay. Well,
that's part of this meeting.
Okay. So I'm from Ualapu. My late grandmother, Kiri Akura Gawai, her land is in Ualapu. So I was raised by my grandparents, my brother and I. And so we know Ualapu very well. This is our ahupa'a, our gathering grounds, hunting, fishing, everything. And we've watched over the years, different kind of residential development, Kilohana Kai built there, and then the subdivision at Kalua'aha. Our fishing grounds are fragile. So, I grew up picking limu, crabbing, fishing, spear fishing, all that kind of stuff. And we've watched the resources dwindle over time. So just the sheer numbers of lots, 200 lots on that mountain is really scary for us from Ualapu. Already our fishing grounds are degrading. Over the years, we've seen reduced rainfall. We used to have morning and evening showers, but now not so much. The streams were perennial, now they're intermittent. The limu grounds don't have as much stream and spring water feeding it, so our limu beds have died back. So my concern is putting one subdivision or 200 lots up there is really scary in terms of social, environmental, cultural impacts. So you guys saying that you're gonna do an environmental assessment is not adequate. Under the historic preservation, under the environmental impact statement rules, you have under HIPAA, if a project may be significant, then there is a need to do an environmental impact statement, which is more detailed. There are a lot of historic sites, a lot of cultural sites up there. To be honest, we've had deaths in that area. We've had hikers die. We've had even Hawaiian people become very pupule because they took certain things on the mountain that they shouldn't have. There are many heiau up there, and my grandmother told me that all these heiau comprise one kino. There is also a heiau in the ocean. So it comprises one body. And, every month we would hear the drums. These heiau are really spooky. And it's not for people to just go holo holo and maha'oi. So I'm very concerned spiritually for families that will be located up there. And then also, if there's gonna be limited infrastructure, having, with the area being more dried out now, and there's issues with fire, and the Kilohana Elementary School is right below. I'm concerned about how that's gonna affect the existing properties, especially our keiki. There was a helicopter that crashed right next to the Kilohana School, and that could have been devastating. So I think, the fact that you guys had one planning process 15 months ago, I was living on Molokai in 2005. There wasn't much input from people from Ualapu. So even though get people who qualify for Hawaiian homelands, I don't think the Ualapu guys was consulted as to what the impact will be on us. So I think you guys gotta seriously consider these things, and it's the ahupua'a tenants, the ho'aina of Ualapu that have a higher say in terms of how their rights are impacted. And under the kapa'akai framework, the assessment is to look at what are the impacts to those of that ahupua'a, Hawaiian people of that ahupua'a. You have to assess, inventory all the different cultural and natural resources that are important to Hawaiian practice. You have to do an analysis of what the impacts would be on those of the proposed action on those rights, resources, practices. And then you have to, according to the Hawaii State Constitution, affirmatively protect Native Hawaiian rights, especially of the ahupua'a tenants under Article 12, Section 7 of the state constitution. So I don't see anything like that in this presentation. I know you guys are in the planning phase, but when you're in the planning phase, that's usually when you're just talking at people and it's a done deal, but we of Manae and especially Ualapu have rights. So that's why I'm very concerned about the impacts. And I'm concerned for the safety of the people that are going to be living on that mountain, because they don't know how spooky that place is. Even for people of Ualapu, we don't go maha'oi. You better know what you're doing, and you better not take anything from that land. So grading, grubbing, all that kind of stuff, I'm worried. I'm very worried.
Thank you, Malia. I think that what you're raising really valid concerns, and I think that's part of the department's effort here, to have these meaningful conversations with the community and to make sure that we as department, the chairman is here, commissioner for the island, we do have applicants who are on the call, and our consultants to sort of have this conversation and hear that type of feedback from the community so that we can understand, what are the concerns? What are the things that we have to be mindful of? And, I think, I've mentioned this earlier, we're really happy to have Kavika and his team on board because their lens, they're going to be able to help and hear not only from this community, but from the experts. He had mentioned earlier that they are facilitators, to hear from the community what the potential pitfalls and challenges and things that we need to understand should we proceed forward. So I want to thank you for sharing your concerns here tonight. And please know that we're hearing them. We're not simply just going through the motions here this evening. We are taking time to make sure that we consider the voices that are in the community. So mahalo for sharing. So I want to just jump back into the chat here. Also, Malia, you get plenty of support in the chat. So I'm going to make sure that, let you know that there are a handful of comments coming in support of what you have mentioned earlier. One comment from just iPhone, it says, why does the name of this project include Kuleana Lands Project? It is almost insinuating you folks are using Kuleana Lands as subject in a Hawaiian Homes project. It sounds like a play on words, which can be very confusing. So specifically, this is, the project is Ualapu Kuleana Homestead Project. That is the title of what we're looking at. So I do know that sometimes within, it can be confused a little bit, but as Kavika had mentioned earlier, when it comes to Hawaiian Homelands and Kuleana Homestead, it's codified in the administrative rules that oversee the program. So it's a very specific thing, separate from Kuleana Lands. Kavika or Andrew, do you guys want to chime in to add any further nuance to that at all?
I mean, I just want to I want to say aloha to Malia. Aloha, long time no see. We were on Barrel Council together. You was on Molokai, I was on Oahu at the time, but acknowledge all of the things she shared first, because I think that's exactly the kinds of mana we're trying to garner an understanding in some of our efforts. We have Kealapono Archaeological Consulting that is led by Dr. Wendy McElroy and her team, and I know she has some folks on Molokai. Maka Casson Fisher, I think, has initiated some of his talk story sessions with some folks. I know there's been a list, and I know, Malia, I think you were identified. I'm not sure if anyone's reached out to you yet, but just to understand this landscape, in one of our last meetings, we had Kawa'a share with us some of the same things you share with. And so I think for us is, again, the settlement plan, which sort of is how we codify the Kuleana Homestead, which is a unique name underneath the rules. And I do agree it can create some confusion, but that's the words that are in the rules. So that's what we're applying. But the settlement plan, again, starts with not just where we're going to put lots, but understanding specifically the identification and the preservation and perpetuation of historical, archaeological, and biological resources. So we're really in that data gathering, mapping phase, if you will, of that information first. And as you've shared, there is just a wealth of information that we're hoping to appropriately document through GPS and survey. And I guess bringing that back to the appropriate groups to have conversations about, well, here's the wealth of what we are able to understand. Here's some of the threats to these quote unquote resources, or these vahipana, vahikapu, and having conversations with the right people to say, okay, and how best do we want to look towards the actions of stewardship, care, restoration, and being mindful of these things first before we start to think about, okay, and now where do we start to put quote unquote these subsistence ag lots in collaboration with that. So I think we still have a lot of homework to do, and I don't disagree with Malia. I think we started with the EA as like the point of entry into the 343 process, and Malia, as I think you articulated very well, right? The sort of the significance level of the project's impact, whether it's through kapa'akai, to the care of natural resources, social economic impacts, that we go through that significance criteria of whatever it is, 200.113. And at the end of the day, if the EA determines there's significant impacts that have to be addressed, potentially then it would turn into an EIS. To your point, there is I think a conversation to be had where we could go straight to EIS, where instead of the EA, we're doing a preparation notice, right? I think before we commit completely to one or the other, I think for now, what we're hoping is to get a handle on things like what I mentioned, the cultural natural resources, soil, topography, water, and then come back and map that out, literally and figuratively map that out, and then reassess what would be the best way to move forward. And again, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the Hawaiian Homes Commission as the accepting authority to then dictate whether the EA is the sufficient vehicle. Anyway, that was a lot of words, Kalamai, but just want to respect the manao being shared by Mulia. So thank you for sharing that.
Kavika.
Mahalo, Kavika. I would just like to add, it's best to just go straight to the EIS, especially if Hawaiian Homes is the accepting authority. It's like, you know, you just basically giving your own self a rubber stamp pass, and it's very easy for things to fall through the cracks and people don't necessarily see the EA in time, and then a FONSI is issued. So I prefer that we just do it right the first time and just go for a full EIS.
Thank you, Malion. Thank you. There is also another question in the chat. This is from Liko. She didn't recall if we mentioned how many residential, agricultural, pastoral lots are included for this area. So I think in the island plan, there was an envisioning of how many lots, but I think clearly, as to Kavika's earlier point, I think we're really early in the process to make any sort of determination as to what the settlement is going to look like until we can, you know, clear some of the initial portions of this planning process. So maybe we could tackle that in a future conversation, or we'll have to see. Question. Does it take legislative action to change the rules title for DHHL's Kuleana Homestead lease program? This is codified in Hawaii Administrative Rules, HAR, so it would be a rule amendment process. This requires governor's approval to initiate. It's an 18 to 24 month process. Usually to change administrative rules, other agencies just conduct public hearings. The Department of Hawaiian Homelands conducts beneficial consultations in addition to public hearings. So to change administrative rules, at least on the DHHL side, it takes a little bit longer, but it is possible. Let's see. I think we might have tackled everything in the chat. So I see one hand up. So if there are others who would like to make comments or suggestions who are on the call, please go ahead and raise your virtual hand right now to start, and then we'll kind of continue the conversation from there. But for now, I do see Mahina's hand up. Mahina, do you have a question or comment? If you do, please go ahead.
Hi, I have a lot of questions and comments, so I hope you'll give me a few minutes. So I want to just share that I don't support this project as it's being presented so far, and I don't see myself getting to a point of ever supporting it. I just want to say that like right off the bat. I'm from Manai, about 4 miles east of Ualapu from Puko'o. And I wanted to talk about water. You know, water scarcity is expected to increase. As we know, climate change and prolonged drought conditions are also expected to progress. You mentioned the wellhead protection area, and there is a wellhead protection area on the mountain, which, you know, heightens the chances of exposing the groundwater source to contamination from any ag inputs or chemicals or other runoff from the development activities. So I think this groundwater pollution potential should be addressed in an EIS. I agree with that we need an EIS. You know, you're sitting this huge development, and it's probably the biggest development in the history of our district, our very rural, very tight-knit subsistence area. And you're putting that on top of our sole source of groundwater for most of our residents. And the well is a skimming well, so it's really shallow. So it makes it more susceptible to contaminants. And you know, there are a lot of water options that are being explored. Catchment, you know, it only works when there's water to catch. Condensation drippings, you can catch that, but it can't really sustain a household. And with, you know, increased drought and rain predictability getting unpredictable, the catchment of rain is not even like something you can count on. And water delivery by truck, you know, it's unfeasible and unsustainable considering the steep 4x4 dirt road that, you know, the distance of the trucking and all the fossil fuels that you'll be burning. That doesn't make sense to me either. And then we talk about agriculture, and that can't happen without a consistent supply of water and a substantial supply of water. Then you have the deer situation, and then how does that affect the neighbors or the migration patterns of deer when you're, you know, kind of throwing them off with this big development? And traditionally, agriculture, it wasn't conducted on the mountain. It was more on the plains and in the alluvium where the rich soil accumulates. You know, on the mountain, you quickly get to subsoil, and any scaled agriculture production, you're gonna have to just carve up the mountain and grade and grub and terrace substantially, and it'll change, you know, the entire landscape. And that goes for making it buildable for homes as well. And all that loosened soil just makes more erosion. So, and just having a hard time wrapping my brain around like any situation where this turns out, you know, feasible and beneficial and like prosperous for the people in the end. And I'm not really finding that. With water too, I'm concerned that if you're not providing water, that there's going to be illegal sourcing of water, like filling up, you know, from the schools at night or the church, or tapping hydrants, or filling from like other county connections. And that further exacerbates the county's already non-compliance issue. And I feel like you have much more hospitable, flatter, more developable land on Molokai that could provide better living situations for people that you could set up infrastructure for. You know, this is just such a tight-knit rural community. We're really protective of our resources and our lifestyle, and adding like 200 to 800 or more people, like slapping them on the mountain in the area, it's just, we don't have the social, the ecological, the physical, or like the economic capacity to absorb that. And we just don't. And, you know, I foresee so many of the recipients ending up like desperate for water and desperate for resources, for shelter. And I don't see it working in the end. So I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration. I think it's helpful for you to know how I feel, you know, now. So
Thank you, Mahina. And I think that is the purpose of tonight's conversation, is really to allow community to have voice in this conversation. I think that all of us would have liked to have better lands within the Hawaiian homelands inventory for Native Hawaiians to homestead on. And while we do have some other lands, many of the lands in the Naiva Homestead and Kalamu'ula, they've been spoken for, and you know, they are a part of future development plans as well. So it's not like this is the only project that the HHO is working on. We are working on other improvements on the island in order to address the waiting list. And the commission has the commission and the department, we have a difficult task in front of us where we have to utilize the lands within our inventory to address the needs of the Native Hawaiian community, as well as balance that with the needs of many of you who are participating in this conversation. So Mahina, thank you for sharing this evening your concerns. We did have another question in the chat, and I apologize. I'm trying to keep up with all of them. And this comes from Kikoa, asking if there will be any disruptions to the Kalua'aha lands. And I'm not sure if Andrew, Gigi, or Kavika are able to speak to that this evening, or if we're still a little too early. Maybe a little bit too early, Kavika.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I don't want to say no. We don't know right now. So I just want to.
We don't know. Yeah. No, I just want to Kikoa. We're gonna. I made a note on that, and if we come back out, when we come back out for future community meetings, I'll make sure that we include that if we come up with an answer.
it does put it on our radar. And again, you know, I apologize because I have not yet been able to at least revisit Ualapu. I haven't been there since 2005. But my team, again, led by Ryan on the engineering side, had. So I know one thing for us, access, just where would primary access be? We always want to look at the secondary access. There's some challenges there. There's challenges as we're learning with even the highway adjacent having some flooding issues. So there's a lot of things we still have to sort of put into our thinking, and yeah, I think what I'm hearing tonight is there are some concerns being shared by folks who are from place, have experience to place. I think, you know, Mahina and again, Malia, thank you for sharing. You know, we haven't circled back to you folks yet. I think we want to have maybe some more in-depth conversations to inform us as to really the viability and feasibility and or what are the challenges and how we will work around them or through them, or if they're not workable. Again, I'm leaning heavy on my engineering team here led by Ryan, who takes all this into his thinking process. And I know we're being led by one of the best thinking minds as possible on that regard. So again, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer tonight, but I just want to acknowledge everything we're hearing, and we are trying to really not just hear it, but take it within our na'au and into our lolo wila here to, I mean, to our brains here to really understand what's being shared tonight. So mahalo.
Thank you, Kavika. Comment from Karen, is there a possibility that after the information gathering that this homestead settlement could be tabled? And then another comment from iPhone asking if the voices here will have a say or if this is just a formality. So I would like to share with everyone that this is not just a formality. We are having conversation with the beneficial community. We're having conversation with this community, with the broader community. And our responsibility with support from Group 70 will be to gather up all the information as we shared in our presentation and get this back in front of the Hawaiian Homes Commission for a decision. You know, they're charged with they have the fiduciary responsibility to meet the needs of Native Hawaiian beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, utilizing the resources that they have available. So we will provide information back to them. That information is going to include the comments from this meeting, but the information is also going to include the information coming from the beneficiary community as well. And then we will place that in front of them, you know, for decision making. So this isn't just a formality, it's a meaningful conversation that we as your public servants are having, not only with you, the community, but definitely the beneficiaries of the act. Let's see, I got myself lost here. Shana, my family owns land in Ualapu. What will happen to my family's land with this project? Shana, as we proceed forward, or as we proceed forward in this, there will be clearer maps of where development may occur, may not occur, and that would inform how this would impact your family's land. The department isn't going to develop on land that isn't in our inventory. We are developing land that is within the inventory of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act and the program. DHL is going to have to give more help to awardees if they want the development work without causing huge problems. So noted. A question regarding Kalama Ula agriculture. For next year's legislative session, DHL has submitted a request for funding for the planning for the Kalama Ula ag lots. That much of the work that we do is dependent on whether or not the state of Hawaii provides the adequate funding for the program to do planning meetings and conversations like this ahead of development, and then ultimately getting construction funds to put in infrastructure into areas where it's appropriate. So with regard to Kalama Ula ag lots, we definitely would call for any beneficiaries on the waiting list to support DHL getting funding to do planning for Kalama Ula ag lots as part of our sufficient sums request going into the session in 2022. And this is Gigi's comment sort of back to everyone, and this is for those of you who are calling in. To clarify, there's a little bit of talk about the 200 lots, or there's been talking about 200 lots going into this area. We're still really early in the planning phase, and to determine the number of lots and sizes, I think we're just way too early. We have to allow our consultants and engineers to complete all of the work that was described earlier in this evening's presentation before we can even have a conversation about sort of sizes and numbers at this time. There's a question from Peter in the chat. And Cora, I do see your hand, so I am going to come to you in a second. Is there still plans to move a Kapa'akea Ohana more Mauka?
I can get down, Cedric.
All right, thank you, Andrew.
The department is currently undergoing a planning process on the south shore of Molokai to look at the impacts of sea level rise on our lessees who have shoreline lots. Part of the process is to look at mitigation measures to mitigate the impacts of sea level rise. So right now, we all are aware of the impacts of sea level rise on our existing lessees in Kapa'akea, but as we go through the planning process, we hope to identify mitigation measures. I think, as we all know, the ocean will continue to rise, and we need to consider how we can mitigate those impacts and how long those mitigation measures will arise. But we haven't come to a conclusion about relocation or moving or any of that type of impact. We understand that those families, those ohana, have been there for a generation, and we want to make sure that we can try to keep them there for as long as possible.
Thank you, Andrew. Any idea off the top of your head how long we've been working on that? That was one of the questions that had come in. The sea level rise planning. Do you know how long Nancy's been doing that one? Or do you know how long we've been kind of working on that?
Yes, the South Shore Erosion, South Molokai Erosion Management Plan has been initiated in 2018. We had significant delays because of COVID and our inability to meet in person. A lot of the outreach activity was tailored for in-person types of meetings, and we had to rethink our outreach approach for that. But we hope to conclude that planning process early in 2022.
Thank you, Andrew. And then, you know what, I found it on our website. So just for everybody's context, I'm going to go ahead and drop that into the chat as well. If you want to follow along with that planning process, I put the link into the chat. There are people who want to participate but don't have technological capacity. So we try to be as open as we can. We do have an email address. If email is challenging, you can call us through our contact center phone number. I can put that into the chat as well, and we can set up someone to call. We want to hear from the community. We can take regular old-fashioned letters as well. So if somebody wanted to write us a letter, you know, we can. Make sure that I put our address and our phone number into the chat as well, so people can call, they can email, they can write us a letter. We'll take any way possible to collect the feedback as we go through this process. Yes, Commissioner Helm, and then we're going to go to Cora right after.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. I just want to make a comment. I just want to send out my mahalos to those that had an opportunity to speak and in the chats as well. So, you know, it's really unfortunate that we don't have live meetings because of the pandemic. But, you know, I think, but this is an excellent opportunity to have everyone share their concerns. And I just wanted to thank Malia for her excellent you know, concerns, and you know, that's what it's all about. And I think we need to continue to allow people to share their concerns on both sides. So yeah, so I just want to thank those people that came on. And
Thank you so much, Commissioner Helm.
Concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go to Cora, and then we'll come back to any future questions or comments from the other participants in the meeting. So Cora, go ahead.
Hey, mahalo everyone. Mahalo for comments from Malia, Kuragawa, and from Mahina. Right on. I just want to make a few comments. I wanted to say that I know that I first wanted to just mahalo DHL and also the expertise on that are handling all the studies and their expertise. And I know that you folks would do a transparency type of research and whatever it takes to address these our community's concerns. But I also wanted to share with all of you that changes are very difficult. I understand, I get it, but I also I support this project for these reasons. Our kupuna has been dying on the wait list, and our people lives in multiple housing with families. And with COVID, it's only easy for them to catch all these viruses, but also that we're also the highest unemployment community in the state. And also with the increase of the import of goods and with all these funds and with all our economy, even globally and statewide and island-wide, you know, our resources will be depleted. And if our people, our Hawaiian people who's on the wait list, have an opportunity to be on a land if it is so indicated by these experts, then so be it. This is our Hawaiian people from Molokai. And I do support this. And I am, you know, and all your concern will be answered. So, you know, mahalo, mahalo, mahalo for everyone's comments and concerns. Mahalo.
Thank you, Cora. I did see a couple of questions pop up into the chat, but I do want to give an opportunity to those who may have not had a chance to speak tonight. For those of you who are calling in through Zoom, or even those of you who have just called in on the phone, I see probably, I would say a half a dozen just telephone numbers. You know, if there's anyone who would like to, you know, ask a question or make a comment at this time, I would like to go ahead and invite you to, you know, unmute and just, you know, state your name and make a comment if you'd like to do so at this time. And if not, you know, we can go back to the chat and answer a few more questions. But I do want to pause and just open the floor to anyone who may want to speak at this time.
I have two questions.
Go ahead, Kelly.
What is the timeline for DHL when you do any development? Like, how long usually do you take for brainstorming and getting mana'o, and then for the next stage? I like to see the end in mind. I think everybody should see that, so that if it is a resounding no, then we know. And then, are you open to a different type of sustainable development up there, which might include like planting?
I think this particular project is a sustainable development, which is envisioned as a subsistence agricultural project where a building of a dwelling isn't necessarily required. It could simply just be an individual who wants to cultivate for their own family's subsistence if they're able to do so. But to your earlier point about what does the DHL timeline look like, I can go ahead and pop that slide up. But I think the way that we had it out was where we are today to where we could be as far as the end of a environmental compliance document is about 2 years. And that's just within the planning process. You know, that's not inclusive of when we're gonna, if we get to developing access roads, etc.
Well, just as a people on Molokai who like we're involved with many other developments, or you know, it's good to know like how much times per month we should be on Zoom or go to a meeting, you know, just so we know.
As far as us coming back out to the community and interfacing, that's the question.
Yeah, and just having an end in mind. Like sometimes we just like if it's no, like right now, seemingly no, then how many more times you got to hear no?
Well, and that's the balance that we as the department have to bring back to the Hawaiian Homes Commission, because it's resoundingly no through this conversation, but with the applicants on the waiting list, and obviously many of them are not from Ualapu, as Malia had pointed out earlier, their appetite and their response to us is different. So we have to bring all of that information forward, as well as the research and information that Kavika and his team are gathering. Okay. Let's see, I just want to, and I do see, Cora, I see that you put Auntie on, so I see her, so I want to acknowledge that. I'm going to come back to your hand that is raised in a moment, but I do want to just give sort of one last call opportunity for others in the meeting or who have called in by phone who may want to speak at this time. So we'll just pause, and then I'll come back to a couple of the hands that have been raised.
Cedric, for the
Yes.
people on the phone, do they need to do something in order to unmute themselves? Or do we have that control on our side?
I don't know, actually. I've never, usually they can unmute on their own.
On their own?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to check if there was any kind of special instruction.
I don't think so. Let's see, with that said, I want to go to Pulama Lima, and then Auntie, I'll come back to you on Cora's computer, okay? Thank you. Pulama Lima, go ahead.
Mahalo nui, aloha hiahi kako, Pulama Lima here. I just have a couple quick questions as well as a comment. Just wanted to get some clarification on the comment that Auntie Cora mentioned earlier. So just to clarify what Gigi noted in the chat, the wait list isn't just specifically for Molokai residents, correct? Is this going to be open to the general DHHL waiting list?
The waiting list that will be used is for applicants who are interested in homesteading on the island of Molokai. So, okay, so you are correct that there are some applicants who may be on the waiting list for the island of Molokai, and they wish to return home, but they're currently residing elsewhere.
Okay, mahalo. Just to sort of piggyback off of Malia's comment earlier, I think it's very important for us to not only note the subsistence and natural resources, as well as the cultural resources that Ualapu and Manae in general is so famed for, but I think we also need to remember and keep in mind the cultural or the community aspect of Manae. Manae is the fabric of the Molokai community, the entire island, right? And so by introducing people not even from Manae is going to change those dynamics. And while I want to support something that is potentially beneficial for our Native Hawaiians and getting them back to Aina, I just want us to also remember that there could be potential concerns of the dynamics changing within the community itself, and to keep that at the forefront, because I think I saw somebody mention in the chat, whatever it will affect, any impact in Manae will affect the entire Manae district. With that said, I recall Kavika mentioning that Kalapono Archaeology is doing talk story sessions, specifically Maka. I am wondering how some of the Ualapu residents can get on that consultation list, and also wondering if this talk story is part of the CIA and the EA process, or is this just precautionary steps that you folks are taking as a planning firm?
I can jump in on that. So good question. It's both. We always try to utilize, especially in this kind of process, Ike Kupuna, however we want to define that. And so, yes, there is a CIA requirement as part of an eventual EA, but what we're trying to do early here is, instead of waiting till we, quote unquote, have a very refined or defined project, is to understand this Vahi. And so Maka has, I believe, and I believe there was a process by which we circulated and asked for names to come forward. I don't have a specific answer for you tonight. I would have to circle back with Maka as to where he is on that list. And for those who want to participate or feel like they want to say something specific to that, again, probably through the means that Cedric indicated in terms of contacting us, we'd be happy to take in that information and give that to Maka and have that circulate back. Well, have him take that information so he can make the appropriate contact. I guess while I'm also kind of speaking to what you're saying, and I noted Malia's comment again, absolutely right on the Kapalkai analysis. So I think to even start that three-prong framework of analysis, we're in that first step of even identifying the scope of what those resources are. And again, hearing tonight what you're sharing, I think how we document that, how we do the field work to supplement or not substantiate, that's not the right word, but to sort of field verify to what we understand in terms of the extent and density and distribution of sites and the type of sites will help us then to really, again, hone in as to what the extent of impact would be on traditional customary rights and practices with the project, regardless if it's quote unquote, that's a subsistence ag project. There's implications there and we want to speak to them and address them. But again, we're just in a state of data gathering. So hopefully I answered your question and all of that.
Thank you, Kavika. I was going to come to you on that. So thank you for jumping in there. And then also Andrew McAllister would like you to get a hold of him later. Yeah.
Saw that. So yeah, Andrew, I can reach out to you for complete disclosure where we're at now, because we're utilizing the archaeological study to comply with just the initiation of the planning process and informing the settlement plan. And because there's literally a lot of acreage to try and ground cover, we were in day 2 of a field investigation of a reconnaissance survey as the first technique to be applied. And again, because of the event, I'm just going to call it, we temporarily suspended field work, and we'll figure out how to get back into the field. Because again, we want to finish the field work. We had it set for about 7 days in the field, and we were in day 2. So we'll need to figure out how to get back out there to finish that work. And but yes, we can circle back with you, Andrew, on those details once we have some more information.
Thank you, Kavika. There's a few more questions in the chat. I want to come back to you folks, but I do want to go to Antti, who is on Cora's computer. Antti, is Cora by you, or are you able to unmute so you can go ahead and make your comment?
Okay, go ahead.
Aloha, everybody. Preschool Hill, he made it so we can put the people on the land. I feel so bad for our people, our own, it makes me cry because you cannot take nothing with you. All you gotta do is leave the best for all the people that's gonna be left. This is for a generation to come. This is nothing for us guys to steal, to take away, to destroy. No, this we know, hard work. It takes a hard work to put everything together. How we feel towards each other and how we ever get to think about not loving each other. How can it be? How can it be? You gotta love somebody. You love all because God loves us. He loves us and he gave us everything for free. The breath of life alone comes from him. He made the heavens and the earth so that we can live in this earth. And then come a time when we gotta go home. And that's why, I cry in my heart. I say, Lord, what can we do for our people that they can see the good, they can see the aloha, that we cannot take nothing with us, but to live happy, to do everything that we can do. I was raised that this is the way. No give eye service. If you see there's a pile of shit over there, go clean it up. No go around and around. That's common sense. You can see that somebody need help. That's the way you do it. That's the way we were doing it. We were raised from Halab in the back of Wailao. My papa was born in the back there. You talk about grandpas and all that. Hey, they left the good for us to carry on, to give our loved ones so that they can do good for the life they live on this earth. Because you know what? We cannot do nothing without God. So I'm really, really thankful that all you folks are putting this together so we can get a place for our people to live on. And it's the cheapest way. The cheapest way. And we get in a hard time. And you know, all the plans were made already. We're not going to leave nobody out. How can you leave somebody out? Because we need each other. And that's why I say to myself, I say, Lord, what can I say to our people that, you know what, we don't own nothing. We don't own nothing. You know, can take nothing with us. So you know what, my family, all of us is family, from the east to the west, the north to the south. Molokai, we're blessed. We're selfish nowadays. We think only about ourselves. No, we cannot do that. Cannot do that. We gotta change our ways. You know, everything you do, you're not going to touch all the sacredness. You know that the value of it. How can you be so stupid for think about that? That's why I cry in my heart. I raised all my children to respect, and that's the way we were raised. From the ocean to the mountain, to the tilting of the soil, you sweat. Why? Because you love your loved ones. You like them to work hard. So they're not scared. They're not homeless. Look at so much homeless people. We don't want that for our loved ones. And so that's why I needed to say something. I need to share because God loves us. I need to share to all of you that I look at you guys and I know how hard work you guys are putting inside this. It's not for me. It's not for me. I'm blessed. I got everything I need. But I'm waiting for all those that they need help. That's why I'm here today to share with you. I don't know my tomorrows, but I want to see Gigi, all of you that is writing in this chat book, whatever's on the telephone. Hey, make it right with the Lord because He knows everything about us. I love all of you. Good night.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you, Auntie. Thank you for that. I know we're getting a little late in time, but I want to make sure I knock down some of the questions in the chat. I think I got a little lost here, but to Auntie Lori's question with regard to project updates for DHL as a whole, I'm gonna put a link to a presentation that Gigi mentioned that we did to the Hawaiian Homes Commission. It's gonna be a YouTube link. It starts right at the update of all the Molokai projects that we're working on, including the water issues. And that was done in April of 2021, and we'll do another update in 22. Fingers crossed, everything goes well. We'll actually be able to provide that update on the island for everyone as well. And now with the live streaming and everything, we'll have a record of this presentation. So I did drop that into the chat for those who are interested. And just speaking a little bit earlier to a question with regard to future meetings, we don't have the future meetings set because we're still in the information gathering portion of this process. When we do have a future meeting, we've been doing direct mail to beneficiaries. We've been posting this meeting everywhere we can. I believe we ran an ad in the newspaper announcing this particular meeting. Tonight's meeting had over 78 people at one point in time. So we're going to continue to get the word out as we have these meetings moving on. Let's see, Andrew, we took care Andrew McAllister's question. We got Sherry L. Mahalo to everyone for speaking out so boldly. Kahale po Maikai has been ground zero for the past 18 years, and we are continuing to bless our Mana'i community with organic produce, all free, and to our community here. The picture you see is of our farmed aina that not only feeds us, but helps our ohana and friends who struggle with staying sober and finding a healthy place and purpose. We'll definitely miss being here. Mahalo for the many fruitful, life-saving years we have been blessed to serve Molokai ala chairs. So I just want to make sure I shared with that. For those of you who are calling in on a phone, maybe if you are interested in making a comment at this time, I did see someone in the chat post that if you press *6, you should be able to unmute yourself. If anyone is interested in having a question or comment. We still have a few minutes left in our meeting. I'd like to open the floor up for anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute and ask a question, make a comment, or share with us your mana'o at this time, to please do so. *6 to unmute. Okay. Hearing none, I would like to call for any sort of final comments, questions, or concerns from those of you who are on the Zoom call. Wait, the video isn't available anymore. Sorry, I see your comment, Nico, that the video is saying it's not available anymore. Let me try to put that in one more time. Copy video here. Okay, the link that I just dropped in there should work. And it should pick up right at the portion of the meeting where we start to cover the Molokai project updates. Thank you, Liko, for checking that before we hopped off the call. Any last comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and put website in and contact information in one more time into the chat for those of you who are interested. Please submit, call us, send us a letter, write us an email. We've heard a lot tonight and we have a lot to consider, and to Gavika's earlier point, we have a lot of homework to do to get information back out to everyone and to the commission for future decision making. And we are very early in the process. And I just want to thank you very, very much for taking the time out on a Wednesday evening to sit on a Zoom call with us. We greatly appreciate it. And I thank all of you on behalf of the department and G70 and the Hawaiian Homes Commission for your participation this evening. Mahalo nui.